Chapter 26. So you've listened to the tape, and now you want to know who did it, boy? Just like that. Despite the fact that it was only mid-afternoon, it felt cold in the bungalow. The sun had gone down when Elsie had led Gwendraeth and Harry Warden into the lounge, where everything seemed to be brown and fawn. Gwendraeth's Uncle Edward had obviously been dozing in the recliner, where he now sat with a checkered quilt over his knees. Gwendraeth couldn't help noticing that one leg twitched restlessly where his brown carpet slipper had fallen off. "Something like that," Gwendraeth said. "Unless you got an objection." "I always got an objection, you know that. Must be the way I'm built. Help me out of this bloody chair, will you, before it swallows me?" Gwendraeth moved the blanket from his uncle's knees and helped him up, handed him the gnarled walking stick which lay against the nearby settee as he did so. Once on his feet, the old man proved to be surprisingly resilient. There was still a stringy firmness to the muscles in his arms, and he was able to walk around the room steadily enough. "You're not dead till you're dead, or until someone decides you've been murdered." He was now standing in front of the plate glass window, looking out over the fields and the river down below. There was a change in his tone. "Or someone butchers you with a chopper in your own posh drawing room." So after they released William Davis, the deaf mute, what happened exactly? Harry Warden's voice sounded very English in his uncle's house. Gwendraeth couldn't help wondering whether his uncle had noticed, and whether it mattered. "He's with you, is he?" Edward asked, indicating Harry Warden with a nod. "He's heard the tapes too." "He has," Gwendraeth said. They both knew that what Edward was asking was whether Harry Warden was reliable or not. But they didn't have to talk about it directly. There was a kind of submerged trust in their relationship, and this indirectness was part of it. "What happened was not a lot at first," Edward said after a while. "Apart from the embarrassment, I had to go back to my regular duties, of course. Fights outside the chip shop on a Saturday night, sprinkling a petty larcenies, you know, the kind of thing. In a way, I was happier, but I can't say the same for Myrick Evans." "Why not?" Gwendraeth couldn't help interrupting. "How am I going to explain this exactly? Especially to him," Edward said, nodding at Harry Warden. "Now we know booze is a killer, but we all thought we were Richard Burton back then. Or Burton thought he was one of us. Take your pick. If you couldn't hold down your 8 pints on a Saturday night, you weren't anything, see? So we all drank, except for Sergeant Timothy Pritchard, station manager, who was a Methodist, who had taken the pledge or something. So Myrick Evans was no better or worse than the rest of us. He'd been drinking for years, hadn't he? But there was a darkness that came over him after that verdict. His wife died of brain cancer about the same time, and I think you could date the decline in him from about then." "So?" Gwendraeth said. Couldn't quite see where it was leading. Edward was a natural storyteller, and Gwendraeth couldn't help feeling he was making the most of it. "So? So is something on the musical scale, so they tell me. So is not how you dress your uncle, is it?" Gwendraeth hadn't expected that. Obviously Edward was getting tetchier in his old age. He looked across to Harry Warden, and the latter said, "Did you have the feeling there was anything else wrong with Myrick Evans at the time?" "Like I said before, I was young. I had feelings oozing out all over me, didn't I? I had to contain them if I knew where my bread was buttered. I had to be a good boy. And no, I didn't really feel anything else was up until I drove Myrick Evans home from his retirement party about 2 years later. Dead drunk he was. We had to load him into the back of my Morris 1000. It took 2 of us to do it. You know, there's some men that are nice drunks, and some men that are nasty drunks, and some that are downright incapable. I knew there was at least 2 others had drunk more than him that night, and they were still there, singing hymns and rugby songs. But Myrig, well, he was out for the count, he was. I drove him home to his semi-detached house on the edge of town, while Bill Davis, who had helped me get him into the car, went back in for more singing. He had a nice tenor, Bill did. Think he ran his family. Anyhow, I had a hell of a job hauling Myrig up his own gravel driveway after I'd parked the car as near as I could to the house. I wasn't daft, was I? I knew he was too heavy for me to do it without him helping, see? So while he was in the back of the car, I went through his pockets and got out his keys, found the one to the front door, and went up and opened it before I brought him in. Then I slapped his face and said, "Myrig, I got you home, now you got to help." He stirred a bit, but he wasn't really coming to. So I left him for a moment, went into the house, found the kitchen, filled a cup with water, and went back to the car and poured it over his face. Part of me enjoyed it, tell you the truth. He'd always been a bit of a bastard to me, so here was a bit of a chance to get my own back, and I relished it. Anyway, Myrig came to with a splutter, but he still wasn't good for much, was he? His legs had gone. So I sort of draped him over my shoulders and sort of dragged him into the house. I was fit in those days, man. Couldn't do it now. But the really important part's what I'm coming to. I dragged him into the front room and dumped him on the sofa. Now, I remember that room from when his wife was alive. I'd had to take him a message once, and she made me wait for him in there. Then it was the kind of front parlour where you could invite the vicar to tea, and he wouldn't even need a plate. Could have eaten off the floor, it was so clean and shiny. Beautifully kept it was, with all those lace doilies or antimacassars or whatever they were draped over the back of the chairs to stop the likes of you and me making them dirty, see? That's how it had been. But Myrig had changed it, hadn't he? Changed it since her death. Now the settee was pushed in front of the bay window. There was a makeshift decorator's table that had been set up against the far wall to use as a desk. And there were piles of papers and stuff all over that. But the shocking thing to see was the corkboard he had pinned to the wall, and on it were these pictures, man. Pictures of Plaswer and Lars and the James family and all these interconnecting arrows and things. He'd created his own incident room in his front parlour, hadn't he? To me, it was obvious. Myrick Evans had still been working on the case in his spare time. And you know what the most surprising thing was? There was no sign or mention of William Davis, the deaf mute who'd been accused and been released. No sign or mention of him anywhere. So, what did you make of it all in the end? The question came quickly from Harry Warden. Gwendraeth was still thinking. Make of it? The answer's somewhere in the James family, isn't it? In them and their relatives. That's what Myrig knew. That's what he was trying to make out, in spite of the fact that someone with influence had leaned on him to arrest the deaf mute. And when that hadn't worked, Myrig had started his own investigation. He must have wanted to vindicate himself, if you ask me. On his way back to the office, Gwendraeth was silent. He knew that he ought to say something to Harry Warden, but somehow he couldn't bring himself to. It began to rain again as they passed the river, and he felt a pall come over him. They were talking about something that had happened 50 years ago, for Christ's sake. Miserborn had been a different town in those days. No Sunday opening. No bypass. A sleepy kind of place that was prosperous enough in its own way. That was why the murder of Henrietta James had been so appalling. It had violated certain principles of decency that the community had set for itself. In comparison, Parker Merriam's death had been far less shocking. At least that was the way he had always pictured it. But what if he'd been wrong? What if the respectable veneer had been an illusion? And Parker Merriam's death was still a death, wasn't it? A violation of the same code, but in different time. You can drop me off here, Chief. Car's over there. Gwendraeth had driven automatically into the police station car park. Harry Warden's remark brought him back to himself. He chose a parking space as near to Warden's car, a dark green Renault, as he could. "You know, I was thinking," Warden said as he got out of the car. "Let's go through those Henrietta James files in the morning. Just for the hell of it." Gwendraeth nodded, and Harry Warden got out and made his way over to his own car. As Warden left, Gwendraeth turned on the CD he'd been playing earlier. The voice of Muddy Waters filled the enclosed space. "I got my mojo working, but it sure don't appear to work on you." Gwendraeth turned the car around, and with Harry Warden in front of him, began to nose his way out of the car park. Later that night, he woke up in the spare bedroom in a sweat. He'd been sleeping in the back of the house ever since Sheila had left. Somehow, he'd been unable to face the empty space in the double bed in the big bedroom. Kept his clothes in there, though, and he'd done his best with a spray to get rid of her scent. But he wasn't always successful. He sometimes smelled lingering traces of l'air de temps, or whatever it was. So the small bedroom at the back had seemed a neutral choice that moved him away from too many memories. He'd been happy enough there, he thought, but tonight it had been slightly chilly in the small room, and he turned on the radiator before getting himself a drink and then turning on the late-night news downstairs. He must have forgotten to turn the radiator off because it was still hot when he woke up. In the dream, he'd been driving along the narrow country lane leading to Place Wernlas. It wasn't exactly the same as he remembered, but in the dream, he knew where he was going. Black shapes of hedges narrowed in on his car, and he was being followed by a dark, bulbous-shaped vehicle that was pushing forward towards him. He knew that he had to get to the house, but he was very hot. The quicker he drove down the narrow lane, the more the bulbous shape behind him pushed in on him, so he had to drive faster and faster. After a while, he came to the open space where the house was supposed to be, but all there was a pale white naked body lying in a heap on the gravel. He didn't even know who it was. He woke up with a shout and found himself drenched in sweat with the radiator still going. Gwendraeth threw off the bedclothes and turned off the radiator. Then he pushed open the door to the small room, and still carrying the image of the pale white thing lying on the gravel in his mind, he went downstairs to the front room and poured himself a whiskey. The television was still on, playing mutely. As he watched, some old footage came on, and a Buddhist monk in flames toppled to the floor. He turned off the television, and he thought about his Uncle Edward, and about how something that had happened 50 years ago still dogged him in the present. Then he had another drink.